I'm here with journalist, author Andy Ngo. Andy Ngo, it's been a while. How are you?
Hi, Stephen. It's really nice to see you again. We go back in the sunset, back before I was more known for my journalism.
Before you became enemy number one, essentially.
Yeah, when I was just a student journalist at Portland State University, Stephen interviewed me on his podcast. And so I have a lot of gratitude for that.
My pleasure. So I think what I want to ask you is you've been described as brave by various people, and that certainly chimes true when I see the response you get when you used to do your street-level journalism. You'd walk around and kind of almost infiltrate far-left mobs and expose them doing the things we all know far-left mobs do, that you had to wear a helmet at one point. This led to sort of multiple assaults, death threats, all sorts of horrible things. Is that line of work over for you now? Could you ever do that again?
I cannot do in the US because of the threats against me, and when I returned undercover to Portland, Oregon in May of last year, I was unfortunately discovered and beaten by Antifa. It's a bit surreal for me to think that in the United States that First Amendment activity like freedom of the press is under attack in this way, and it's not being discussed by all the journalist rights organizations. I have reached out to them. I'm a member of some of them, paying member, and they absolutely refuse to speak out for all these instances because, in their minds, a conservative journalist is not a journalist or not worthy of any free speech protections.
Yeah, I think that's particularly tragic, the way all the institutions have been captured, because even if they think you're like the devil, they should at least be able to stand on principle and say, this is our profession and we deserve the right to be able to do it without being assaulted. So, typically people throw you in that far-right box, but isn't it a problem as well that whenever things happen to people like you, the only organisations that do step up and the only people that do step up to offer you support are largely conservatives or right-leaning people?
Yes, that's true. And I think that's actually a big difference between the United States and the UK that I've learned, is that here, maybe it's because it's a much older, you have traditions and norms that are much older than the US, that it's perhaps easier for some organizations to take a more principled stance. For example, in the debates about the gender-critical views in the United Kingdom, it's not within the camp of just the right wing who has the view on it, who's pushing back, I should say. It's really both, and I would say actually being predominantly led by left-wing women.
Yes, I can attest to that.
In the United States, those who spoke out are religious conservatives and those who are socially conservative. And so it's been made, those views are dismissed in the mainstream left and the mainstream media as right-wing views and not worthy of any legitimacy. And so the debate ends very, very early. And so, even this type of conference here that we have, the Battle of Ideas, I don't think you could get together as people on the left and right in America and to hold discussions and debates in a similar matter. Actually, I'm very confident you cannot.
Yeah, I think we've both been at MythCon together, haven't we? And one of the gripes of the organisation every time I speak to them was that they tell me that they do their utmost, their absolute best to platform lefties, and they all turn it down. There's an issue there. But talking of the discussion, and you touched on the First Amendment there, I'm immensely jealous of the American First Amendment. So last thing I'll ask you, I suppose, in a country that doesn't have the First Amendment like the UK, we seem unlikely to be prone to the sort of street violence that you've seen in response to speech in America. I don't know if you've got any kind of grip on what the difference is culturally between America and the UK in terms of speech. It just feels like the situation's less polarised in the UK around speech, even though we don't have a protective First Amendment and we do have hate speech laws. The culture seems a bit more relaxed about it compared to, say, America.
Yeah, I've been trying to pinpoint what are some of the key variables that make generally everything is just more moderate here. And
we're very repressed in general.
And there was a time in America where people who had debates and discussions in public rallies when people disagreed with it, they ignored it or they moved on with their lives. That's not the case anymore for a number of years in the United States. You cannot have a Republican Party type of event in Portland without significant threat of violence. That I would say the same thing about Seattle and San Francisco, Oakland, possibly LA, and many other left-wing cities in America, Boston. Whereas here, I mean, in London, I'm seeing London, the liberal city, where you have, all manner of, let's say, anti-lockdown events, even anti-vax events, and people who disagreed with it just moved on with their lives. There was no organized, militant, violent, direct action against it. And maybe perhaps, even as though you don't have the equivalent of the First Amendment here, you have perhaps a better established norm of freedom of expression as an expectation and a cultural value. And I wonder, actually, if that's actually, in the long term, what will better protect freedom of expression. Because in the US, yes, we have the First Amendment, but we have places like where I'm from in Portland, Oregon, where if you speak out, other citizens will carry out acts of violence against you, and you have no recourse. Law enforcement won't respond if you're getting beaten or attacked. And so the natural consequence of that is you just stay silent in order to continue to be unharmed physically.
All right, Andy, thank you very much for your time. It's lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Stephen.